Welcome to Create the Future podcast. I'm Rick Williams. The Create the Future podcast is a forum for leaders to share their story about difficult decisions they've made for their company, or for that matter, for any organization, and in some cases for themselves. My goal is to share these stories about leadership and making tough calls with a broader leadership community so you will become a more successful leader for your organization. I'm excited to introduce you to Bob Howard. Bob is the Director of Recruiting Operations for Magic Talent Solutions. Magic Talents works with organizations to upgrade their recruiting and professional development. So, Bob, welcome to Create the Future podcast. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey to get to where you are today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, it's kind of a crazy story and a very much nonlinear trajectory to where I am today. But I started out in the Marine Corps. Joined at 18, spent about 12 years there before I got out. And during that time I got exposed to a lot of different leadership types, a lot of different areas. And I brought that with me when I came out to the civilian world, where it was a little bit of a culture shock and a little bit of trying to find my own way. Didn't know what I was doing. The last thing I did in the Marine Corps was recruiting. So I came out and started at some recruiting firms and didn't see a fit there, in the kind of that firm agency lifestyle, and decided to try in-house. Worked at a few in-house companies here in San Diego in the biotech, medical device area, and then realized that with the fragility of the economy and the companies, especially around COVID, I realized that if I was going to deal with this type of uncertainty, I want to do it on my own. So that's
Mhm.
when Magic Talent Solution was born, and I started working with companies and individuals trying to up level their skills, leadership, professional development, and also help companies find top tier talent. And that's where it's led me here today, and I continue to do that to this day.
Well, I'm actually back up for 1 second here. You mentioned the phrase a culture shock of coming out of the military, the Marine Corps, and then getting into civilian life. Share a little bit about that story, because I think that would be actually helpful to people to hear that. What was the difference you were experiencing? Why was it so difficult? I'm not saying there isn't any. It's just, what was your actual experience with that?
So, my experience and, purely anecdotal for myself, but, coming from the Marine Corps, very much team orientated, take care of each other, we're all in it together type mentality, right? That team brotherhood type mentality.
Hmm.
When I first came out, one of the first places I worked at, and I won't say where, but it was a recruiting agency here in San Diego. And I actually witnessed a fist fight in between two people fighting over a candidate. And basically, what happened was one recruiter was working with a candidate, they stopped working with them. Another recruiter picked up that candidate, and then it got placed. And then one recruiter was complaining that they weren't getting paid. And then it just ended up, throwing hands. And I was sitting here like, we're working for the same company. Why are we fighting each other? And it really comes down to just, it was about commission, right? I mean, these people are paid a very low salary in exchange for higher commissions. And when one person feels like their commission was being taken, they, wanted it, and that's what happens. And it came to those blows. And I saw that, and I was like, this isn't breeding a teamwork. These meetings that we have in the morning saying we're a team, we got to work together. I wasn't seeing that at all. And I think that was just the boiling point for me in realizing that this wasn't the place to be. So I got out of the agency kind of hamster wheel, if you will, and moved into a internal position where I was working for the company, recruiting people in and seeing them. So going from that teamwork and very much a brotherhood, people that, I even deployed overseas with, to people I recruited with, it was all, teamwork, trying to help each other. Then a complete 180 to I need to figure out a way to make the most commissions. And if someone else is making commissions, that's commissions I'm not making. So it was very much, a cutthroat area that I just did not like. And it was very much foreign to me.
So and I know this is not what we got together to talk about, but I think this is also helpful. So I I'm thinking about you're talking about the team working together to achieve common goals.
Mhm.
There's also within your military organization leadership that is setting expectations for what the organization is doing, how people deal with each other who are on the team. There also was either leadership or absence of leadership within the agency that you were working with. Talk a little bit about those two differences so people, because I think that's helpful for people to understand that leadership has an enormous impact on the success of the organization.
Absolutely. And it really comes down to, do you have, a leader or do you have a boss? Do you have somebody who is going to sit in their office and tell you what to do versus a leader who is there trying to remove obstacles, helping you get forward to your goal and making plans to help you get there instead of just saying, do this and you'll be fine, right? So going back to the Marine Corps, recruiting duty from the Marine Corps between 2014, 2018, in Connecticut. Actually, I was in Norwich, Connecticut, and Norwich is, it's got a lot of farmland. It also has very urban areas. So it's very much a mixed bag when you're recruiting. So some areas would have a very easy time recruiting, and some areas would have very difficult time depending on the demographics of the area. You'd have people over in Stamford, which is very affluent, very, much close to, business orientated, close to New York City. It was a little bit tougher for them versus, a little bit where I was from, kind of, a lot more rural areas, a lot of farmland. I mean, I recruited at least a few guys that, in high school worked on farms. So it was very, a little different there. So you'd come together and you'd actually, there was times when one recruiting station in the whole unit would recruit, maybe over their mission, and another team would recruit less. But the station, our higher command overall would make the mission, so it would be okay. Even though, hey, this one team did a little bit more one month, maybe, when they get in trouble and they're recruiting less, they'll be able to be covered by another unit, which happened all the time. There were some times when we were high, we were low, and when we were right on, our numbers. So it was very much a team effort. Even though we're separated into smaller substations, the recruiting station as a whole was making their mission. Now,
Mhm.
flip to, one some of my experiences in the civilian world directly after getting out. You have this guy sitting in his office, never really seeing him much. He was the boss, said, "Hey, make your phone calls, get these spots hired." But it was very much a every person for themselves.
Mhm.
If I'm placing a role and making commission, somebody else didn't. And that bred this almost contempt for your fellow recruiters and account managers. And it really brought about this cutthroat mentality of trying to, make the most of it. And, people would feel like you're, taking food off my table by, getting this candidate or, I was speaking to them, but you ended up speaking to them. And it was just this very much, kind of laissez-faire type style leadership where, hey, here's what we got going on, make it happen, and then, we'll see what happens.
So the leader, the boss, whoever it was of your civilian agency, did not see creating success for the whole office or division or company or whatever it was as the goal. It was, hey, I've given you guys an opportunity to go do your thing by yourself, but we're not, whether you win or lose, that's up to you. We're not here to win as a team, as an office, as a company.
Yeah, and the office obviously, had their numbers they had to meet and if they're producing or not, if it makes sense to keep these people on, all that good stuff. And that made sense, but it was very much not at the expense of others. If
Right.
person A is doing really well and person B isn't, well, I'm going to spend my time with person A instead of developing person B to help them. It was very much, you saw people going in and out all the time, and it was very much a environment to where as long as the office itself is doing well, I don't care what happens to the other people. So it was very much, a self-interest and self-preservation versus, being a team. And I get that to an extent, right? Everybody's got to take care of themselves, but at the same time, if you're trying to build this teamwork and build this camaraderie and have people, at this company for decent tenures, you gotta invest in your people, and it very much wasn't that. It was, hey, this person's doing really well. It's enough to carry the team, or hey, it's enough for right now. That's what we're gonna do. And I think some of that had to do with just the development of the leader itself, right? The leader, was very successful as an individual contributor. And, unfortunately, that doesn't always mean you're going to have that leadership qualities and the leadership experience to be successful as a leader, or at least make the people under you as well successful. Because I think that's a very good quality and a very good
Mhm.
indication of a good leader is how well your people are doing under you. And I think more inexperienced leaders feel threatened when, they see someone doing well. Or maybe even better than they did when they were an individual contributor, and that can create some animosity and generally not good for the cohesive environment.
Yeah, no, I think you're making extremely important points that the transition from being a contributor, but a successful contributor, to being a leader is a very different role. And you can't just think about yourself. You now
Mhm.
have to you're responsible for the people you're within your group being successful and helping them be successful, not just yourself be successful. So let's go on and tell the story about how you learned to create a more successful organization for yourself, for your company. I think that's a really interesting story that people will draw value from.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I was working for these agencies. I tried my hand at in-house, pretty volatile, especially given COVID. Funding kind of going up and down for a lot of these biotech companies, and decided that okay, I'm going to do this on my own. I have the skills to recruit. I have some business knowledge, so I'm going to do this on my own. And a lot of that, it took a lot, and it was very, scary decision at the time, right? To kind of forego guaranteed money for providing for myself completely. And
Mhm.
the way decisions were made at that point, I mean, it was a lot of looking at the numbers, looking at, okay, what makes sense and how do I do this? How do I find business now? How do, instead of being
Right.
being for a company, they're always hiring. They tell you, hey, here's the roles we have coming up. And to be perfectly honest, whether I fill them or not, I'm still getting a paycheck.
Sure.
Now, working for myself, I mean, I could get a client, and if it's a contingency contract, I may not get paid for all the work I did if my recruits don't get hired. So it was a very scary decision to make and have that understanding, knowing what I'm going into. And it was all really come down for me a lot of data and trying to keep emotions out of it and keeping not being overly optimistic, saying, I can do this, it's fine, it's gonna be easy, but having that cautious optimism, I guess would be the word, to know that it's going to be a difficult road and that there are going to be times when, it's going to be highs and lows where money will be coming in and then it may stop for a little bit and then, pick back up and I may not get back up to where I was before. So very much a different way of doing business or not doing business, but making money, and
Yeah.
had to really kind of buckle down, focus, and keep my eye on the future.
Well, do you I know you've talked about a point of um where you had to make a decision about changing the structure within your company of how people were, I don't know, compensated or motivated, or I may not be using right terminology, but what led you up to the point where you realized, gee, I have to make a change here? What was there a moment of something was really going wrong that said I have to change, or it gradually came on you that, gee, I think I can do better? Kind of, what was the process of bringing you to the point where you said, I gotta, I think I have to make a change. Maybe I really should make a change. I am going to make a change. I mean, talk a little bit about that process for you.
So again, it comes back to the data, right? And the data that I'm seeing, the production I'm seeing from people, or just the feedback I get, and it's about, for me at the beginning was listening to, those under me, listening to how they're doing, how they're feeling, how is this arrangement working for them? Do they feel like they're part of a team? Because although I do work on the agency model, I was trying to get away from that model to which would pit people against each other instead of working together as a team. So it came down to how is this teamwork going, or how is this model going to make teamwork better? How are we going to make sure that people are feeling like they're valued, that they're not
Mhm.
fighting against the person in the chair next to them? Or it's remote, but you get the picture. How they're going, and that they're being able and they're happy enough to continue and stay with the company, and that way we're not having this constant turnover because that's another problem you see a lot. So what it came down to was, you know, as a small company, we don't have the coffers to pay out these large salaries. It's just not possible. So commission is something relied upon. But how do we make it so that way commission doesn't feel like it's being stolen from one another? And that's really what it was, to make people feel more comfortable about working with that commission base. Because you see it in sales a lot where, it can be very cutthroat. It can be very much,
Mhm.
a me versus them mentality, even within the same
Mhm.
company. So trying to get rid of that was a challenge. So what it came down to was figuring out how to pay those higher salaries with still having commission, but making the structure not a free for all, and making sure that everyone gets an equal share of the work, right? And I kind of broke it down and thought about it like traditional restaurants with servers. They have a way to give people and make sure everyone's getting an equal piece of the business walking in the door. So that's what we had to do. Make sure that when the business is coming in, we're making it and giving it, and not just saying, "Hey, here's the business, start working on it, everybody." Hey, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, and that way they see the value and they see that it's equal and that everyone is getting that fair shot at being able to make the most for themselves.
So, just so I'm understanding this, are you saying that when you left the agency and then formed your own company, the formation of the company is where you implemented these changes? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All
so
right.
this is where
I see.
I understood the business model, but I had to get away from that model where I don't want people fighting in the office, right? I don't want people fighting. I don't want people quitting because they feel like they're not getting that appropriate compensation for their work, or that they're feeling like their coworkers stealing from them.
Okay, so all right, this is helpful. I wasn't actually clear myself about that. So talk a little bit. I want to go through in a way kind of how you made the decision to do this and then came to the point of actually. So part of this is creating the decision to create your own business. Did
Yes,
you have, I don't know if you're married or not. Whether you are or not, but I bring this up in the context of how did you use, im- I don't know, advisors or people who are close to you to help you think through, gee, do I really want to do this? Or what is it? What am I really trying to accomplish here? How did you use your kitchen cabinet, if that's the right term, or your close advisors, or how did you involve other people in helping you figure out, A, what you want to do and then how to do it?
absolutely. And it came with one, I am married. My wife was very supportive with this move. She saw kind of what I was going through in the market and the changes that was going through as well. So she understood and was very supportive. But also on the business side, I had the fortunate well, I had good fortune to have people that I knew that went through the local business school here in San Diego at UCSD. There's Rady School of Management, and they learned a lot, and they were able to kind of give me some of that experience on and knowledge on what they learned there and how they were able to use their studies to build a business. And they actually helped me go through, like, hey, first thing, you got to go register your name, register sole prop or LLC or whatever, right? Things that you kind of get overwhelmed with just thinking about all the little different steps you got to go through, right? So, they were very, I had a couple people. One was in sales and another was in recruiting actually as well. And, they were able to give me a lot of great information about how to, how I need to be set up, how I need to protect myself, as well as how do I, what do I want to look? And they helped me create that vision. And, the vision that, we were coming up with, they asked me, okay, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do about employees? What are you going to do about revenue flow, tax prep, all these little things that people don't really think about when they're starting a business because they're too focused on just trying to get money in the door and back then survive. So I had these great friends, advisors that were able to bestow a lot of knowledge on me on what they've learned just through their experiences because they were a little bit older than I, but also able to what they learned pretty recently. They had just graduated, so it was a lot of information was very fresh in their mind. They were able to help
Right.
help me and advise me, which was very, very fortunate and helped me get to where I am today.
Well, I don't know if this is the right analogy or not, but it's like standing on the edge of the pool and deciding if whether you're going to jump in or not. These people, as I'm listening to you, are saying, well, when you're actually in the pool, you got to do swim like this. How did you, I don't know, work through in your own mind the decision that, oh, I'm really gonna jump in and do this?
Yeah.
Did you, I don't know, go away for the weekend and or go to the gym or
Mhm.
get your friends together and have beers and say, whatever, which I really, I mean, how did you decide, okay, I'm really going to jump off the diving board into the pool and do this?
Yeah, so it was one of those things where, I come back, told my wife just what was going on and how everything was so turmoil. And I disagreed with this decision, disagreed with that decision, right? And she's like, hey, talk to these guys. You know that they have been working in this space and that they've had experience at that school. They just graduated. Talk with them. So, we got together down in this house, had some beers and, really kind of decided, all right, are you going to do this? Like, well, I think, I think I can, and I'd rather try it and at least know that I tried and gave it what I could.
Yeah.
And, right then and there, we went on to the website and looked at business names and tried to find a business name and going through, different names and trying to figure out what made more sense. And, there was times when we'd make a name like, oh, it sounds great. And then we were like, wait, it doesn't make sense. It's like, no, it's terrible. It's just like that ebb and flow of excitement over a name and then realizing, no, it's terrible. And then going back and coming back down. So it's a roller coaster of emotions, and then, of course, here and there, within the first couple months, like, oh, am I making the right decision? And kind of reassuring myself of like, yes, this is something I have to do. I have to give it a try and see what happens. Because if not, then and I'm going to be upset with myself. I'm going to be wondering, what would have happened.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about your own feelings going through this. I mean, not that I mean, could be excited that, wow, this is a great opportunity. You can, oh my God, I'm really afraid. What would happen if this doesn't work out? Or uh, unsure about I mean, talk about how you dealt with your own emotions about this.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot. Again, roller coaster of emotions, just with picking the name, but also just with doing this, right? And wondering, like, okay, great, super excited. Obviously, first, kind of once I said, yes, I'm diving in, great, excited, awesome, very happy about this. I really want to do this, really gonna be great. And then, sitting at night, kind of just looking at the ceiling, like, what if this doesn't work out? How am I going to be able to pay my bills? How am I going to afford rent? And then it was, but what if it goes well and I'm going to, be able to buy a house and, bigger house or, nice car and all, all these things. And then again, like, oh, but what happens if I don't? I'm building myself up. And it's just like that tennis match of emotions going back and forth, thinking about all the things that could go wrong and then thinking about all the things that could go right. And then thinking about, oh no, this is what I actually have to do before any of that happens. And trying not to get ahead of myself. I find myself getting ahead of myself a lot and thinking about things, thinking about step 4, 5, 6 when I'm not even, through step 3 yet. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you kind of had to check yourself, look and be like, okay, no, I need to do this first, and then we can worry about that, right? Trying not to put the cart before the horse.
Okay, I want to bring up the word courage. And having served in the Marine Corps, I know that the notion of courage is something that you've had to deal with, the courage to do things that would seem completely irrational of taking on an enemy whose job is to kill you. That's not what I want to talk about here. I want to talk about the courage to do this. The courage to take on a risk like this. Where did you, for you,
Mhm.
where did you get the courage to take the risk of starting a business that might fail?
I think a lot of it comes from support from my wife. And that's just
Mhm.
because like she has a job, she works, and knowing that I'm going to have this, streaky at best income source, having her support was super helpful in giving me the
Mhm.
confidence and telling, her believing in me and helping me kind of let that courage or that belief run off and rub off on me of being able to know I can do this. And I have, I have the education, I have experience. It's now just a matter of putting that into practice and doing it. And having the courage to figure out, okay, I can do this, and getting rid of that self-doubt was huge, and knowing that, my wife and even my, my close friends and advisors of having that belief in me gave me the courage to do it. And that simple of
Mhm.
when, when the outside doubt is removed, the self-doubt goes with it. If other people are believing in me, why am I not believing in myself? And that is probably a huge turning point that I came across that helped me move in that next step and make it, make that decision to go on my own.
You know, I, I'm also wondering about. I'm just listening to you makes me think along this line. I think it's very different if you say, I'm looking down this road. I know it's going to be tough going down this road, but I know exactly what I have to do to go down this road. Versus, gee, I'm starting down this road and I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know I'm going to have to, you know, innovate, change, uh, maybe change directions, whatever. It's two very different perceptions of risk and courage when you set out on those two on a road that looks really hard to do, but at least you know what you have to do versus one that says it's probably hard and I'm not quite sure what I'll have to do, but I'm going to go anyway. How did you perceive what you were undertaking and why did you decide? I mean, again, I'm talking about in my mind, I'm thinking about courage here because
Yeah.
part of courage comes because I know it's tough, but I know what I have to do. Another form of courage says, I think it's going to be tough, but I'm going to have to innovate and things might not go the way I'm thinking about it, and I'm still willing to go. Those are two quite different forms of courage of building yourself up to the point of saying, I'm willing to do it. How did you think about this in that context?
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point of, again, going back to working internally, right? I know I show up to work, I do my work, and I go home. Business decisions, the bosses let me know what's going on. Kind of, okay, great, going down that road. Pretty much can guess what's going to happen. Versus going on my own and dealing with those challenges, you're right, and the changes that have to come up that you don't anticipate dealing with. And there was a point where I actually ended up, so it wasn't always Magic Talent Solutions. It was something else called Talent 180, which ended up changing, route with that and, getting away from kind of that idea and moving into where Magic Talent Solutions is now. And it was very much, not knowing what was going to happen and then having to make those changes, almost not instantaneously, but making those changes as they come up and not knowing what
Mhm.
is going to be next or what's going to happen. You kind of think about, you try to think about business in, linear, but then you start, okay, I got to make a turn here real quick and then we'll come back in, right? So it's that straight line, but then you kind of make a detour, come back to that straight line eventually, right? There's point A, point B, but in between you got A1, A2, and whatever else happens. And having that understanding and kind of trying to get yourself in that mental state of knowing that it's going to happen, that this isn't going to be an entirely straight line from A to Z. There's going to be, an infinity amount of stopping points. And, sometimes day to day, you're going to be making changes or undoing changes that you made the day before because new information is available. And that's what it's
Right.
all about, is being able to be flexible. And I would see this in some of my consulting clients where they don't want to make changes or it's very difficult to make a change. And when you're a company of 150 people or less, you really should be able to make changes rather quickly instead of having this bureaucratic stone wall of trying to get, one little thing changed or even make
Mhm.
one decision. Why is this decision going all the way up, to the CEO? It needs to be made, at the lower level. And I really took that mentality with me of being able to make those decisions, even with, my company being as small as it is, being able to do that and deal with the changes and knowing that this decision I make right now may not stick past the week and trying to anticipate the changes, which I mean is just, you'll drive yourself nuts trying to do that. It's so many changes, so many different things to do, and having the courage and understanding to do that, I think really comes with being real with yourself and understanding that this isn't going to be easy and that it's going to be a lot of difficult bumps in the road, a lot of setbacks. I may take one step forward and two steps back on some days, but other days I may get that forward progress. And it's understanding that and knowing that you're going to have to fight through those difficult times and knowing that just because you hit a block doesn't mean you stop and give up and just go find a salaried job.
Right.
So understanding it and knowing when to, maybe, store up your cash flow a little bit and wait till you expand and figure out what vendors to use and all these different things that come with it. And having that understanding that those can change on a dime any second is very important. And understanding that that's going to happen, not an if, it's more of a when, really helps you gain that confidence, which that confidence grows into the courage.
So, Bob, let me ask you one more question. We'll wrap this up. I, uh, one of the things that I advise in when I'm talking about making difficult decisions is your responsibility as a leader, not just to make decisions, but to manage the decision-making process and also to manage yourself. Have you, having gone through all this, seen ways that you are managing yourself as are faced with difficult choices that you've had to make? And it's different for everybody. So I don't know whether you go for a walk or go to the gym or you mentioned that you got together with your buddies and sort of as a group kind of made one of the really important decisions. How do you think about managing yourself at moments of high stress that are very important for you when you're making choices and decisions that will have a big impact on you and your company and those around you?
Yeah, managing emotions and I think taking full ownership definitely helps with that. So understanding that when I make a decision, I own the fallout as well and not the people that follow through with those actions, right? So if I'm telling a team member or telling, a company that they need to do something, I need to own the outcome. If I gave them the step-by-step instructions, they followed it, I own the outcome.
Mhm.
And it can be difficult. It's something that, for me, I like to think I'm able to handle stress pretty well. And what I try to do is, you know, I try not to let the stress get to me, and whether that is, watching a hockey game or, kind of just when I'm walking the dogs and start, probably going through these thought processes and thinking about these different things. It's very important for me to be level-headed and,
Mhm.
get those thoughts out, whether, however stupid they may sound, and go from there.
So, Bob, this has been great. I want to thank you for sharing your experiences. You've made a valuable contribution to our understanding of the challenges leaders face every day. So, how can our audience and members who want to learn more about you and Magic Talent Solutions?
Yeah, so whether you're a business owner looking to maybe help develop your people or hire some more employees, you can go to my website magictalentsolutions.com, and you'll see a button to get in touch with us, and it'll be lead you to a little form you can fill out, and that'll come right back to our inbox, and we can get in touch on how to help you. Or if you're an individual looking to upgrade their own skills, or you're looking for a new job, we're always taking resumes, adding to our database to help future clients and help them find a new job.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Bob. I just want to end up by thanking our audience for taking the time to engage with our guests and learning from our guests. If you have a compelling story to share about making a difficult decision, please contact me. So go to rickwilliamsleadership.com and go to the Create the Future podcast section on the website. Again, that's rickwilliamsleadership.com. Remember that you create the future by the decisions you make today. Take time to get your important decisions right. And yes, also have some fun. Until next time, be well.